Okay, thanks everyone for coming. This is a webinar around the benefits of migrating from Oracle WebLogic to Payara Server. We'll do a short technical piece first. I'll talk a little bit about Payara, what is Payara Server and its relationship with Jakarta EE and our vision for how we deliver Jakarta EE compliance and compatibility. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the technical benefits of Payara, say over Oracle WebLogic, or any problems you might have been having in Oracle WebLogic. And then I'll pass over to my colleague Jono, who will talk a little bit around the commercial model and differences commercially between Payara Server and WebLogic. So first, Payara is first and foremost a Jakarta EE application server. Our goal really is to be first for Jakarta EE developers. So we have two editions of Payara. We have Payara Community and Payara Enterprise. Payara Community is our open source version of Payara. Payara Community is there to deliver innovation and to deliver for development environments. And our aim in Payara Community is to be first for Jakarta EE. And what we mean by that is we want to be first for delivering compatibility. So we are part of the Eclipse Foundation Jakarta EE working group. Jakarta EE was formed at Eclipse Foundation after Oracle decided to migrate Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation, and we are a strategic member of the Eclipse Foundation. So we are committed to delivering those specifications, and we're heavily involved in the implementation and the definition of the Jakarta EE specifications. So as a company, our main product is Payara. Payara Enterprise is our supported version, and Payara Enterprise is targeted at mission critical environments where you're running mission critical Jakarta EE applications. So we are a Jakarta EE company, and we're committed to delivering Jakarta EE to you and to your teams and to your developers. So what's our vision for where Jakarta EE is going? So Jakarta EE has been around for a long time. As a standard, it's been around for about 20 years. And part of the goal of moving to the Eclipse Foundation, moving Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation and turning it into Jakarta EE is to bring on a lot more innovation, a lot more speed, and a lot more modernization. So us in the Payara team, we're really focused on allowing you to take a Jakarta EE application, which you develop, and to create your deployment unit and then deploy that on any modern infrastructure. So that means on public cloud or hybrid cloud, within container environments, or even to very small environments like IoT devices or edge servers, and also to modernize the standards. So through both the Jakarta EE and MicroProfile initiatives. So MicroProfile is like an offshoot of Jakarta EE that is focused on bringing new innovative microservices APIs into the Jakarta EE ecosystem. So MicroProfile is a different group, but it's based on top of Jakarta EE, and we're also delivered MicroProfile compatibility. So our key goal, just to repeat, is to modernize Jakarta EE and ensure that you as Jakarta EE developers or companies deploying mission critical Jakarta EE applications can use them in whatever environments that you wish to use in modern infrastructure. And our vision for that is essentially that you can take your application, your WAR file, the thing that you've written that has all your business code and your business logic, and then you can take that artifact and you can deploy it anywhere. One of the key differences of Jakarta EE, Java EE over, say, other frameworks like Spring Boot is that we separate out the application from the runtime. And this is also key if you currently have applications running on WebLogic. If they're written to the Jakarta EE standards, and those applications can obviously be deployed to the Payara server rather than WebLogic server. And one of the key benefits of Jakarta EE is that separation between runtime and application. And then we take that further in the Payara platform. So as I said, our goal is to enable you to run your application anywhere. And we have different different editions and different products that can take that application and run it on different infrastructure. So on very small infrastructure or containers, we have a product called Payara Micro that's targeted for microservices environment. I'll speak a little bit more about it later when we talk about hollow jars. And it can be run on very small environments like Raspberry Pi or edge servers. It's a single container that packages your application and the runtime together, and it can just run it in a peer-to-peer way. So you don't need domain administration servers or administration servers in WebLogic terms. You can just run these as single jar files. And that is suitable for IoT edge containers and container infrastructure on a peer-to-peer basis. We also have Payara Server, which is more traditional, more like a normal WebLogic domain. It has an administration server and it has managed servers, and they can then run your application and deploy it across a cluster or a set of application servers and managed instances. And we use that, and that has integration with both virtualization infrastructure, Kubernetes. You can also run that on public cloud, and we built clustering models where it automatically clusters on public cloud infrastructure. And then as we move further up the stack, we're currently in development of a product called Payara Cloud, which is a Kubernetes native application server. So that runs currently on Azure, but in the longer term will run on top of Kubernetes, and it essentially allows you to deploy an application on top of Kubernetes and without knowing anything around Kubernetes and the complexity of configuring and setting up and scaling applications on top of Kubernetes. So our vision really is to take your application, that application that if written to Jakarta EE can deploy onto WebLogic. We can take that application and deploy it on any of these platforms through Payara platform. So let's look a little bit more into WebLogic and how you can overcome some of the issues you may or may not have experienced in WebLogic. I'll talk a little bit about each one of these individually as we go through it. WebLogic has been around, since BEA days for a long time, similar to Jakarta EE. It's a traditional application server, and as a product, it's mature, so it moves quite slowly in compared to Payara. As I said, we have community, which moves very fast, and we have enterprise, which adapts the community lifecycle to make sure that you have mission critical application support. So WebLogic moves slowly. It has different clustering options to Payara, which we'll go into. And Payara also has a lot of monitoring and we have Payara Insight in Payara Enterprise, which allows a lot of diagnostics into what's happening in your applications. And we also have Payara Micro, which I'll go into, around hollow jar functionality. So if we look a little bit about WebLogic, so Payara is released on a monthly basis. So every month we release a new version of Payara Enterprise. Those include fixes, security updates, and we do new features. The way we work is that Payara Community is also released very regularly. We take what's in the community when it's stabilized and move it into our enterprise product. WebLogic has a large gap between major releases between servers, whereas Payara, as I said, moves it very rapidly. And that means you get very fast upgrades of the different components that are in the community, like CDI, and which comes from JBoss Weld or JAX-RS. And also we fix vulnerabilities as fast as possible, and we release patches and hot fixes for those. Also, Payara, as I said, we're committed to Jakarta EE. We're fully on board and fully driving Jakarta EE standards. So our standard support is very rapid. So it took a long time for WebLogic to support Java E8 and even longer to support Jakarta EE8. WebLogic currently doesn't support MicroProfile unless you use a different product from the Oracle stable, so not WebLogic, which is Helidon. But Payara supports both Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. So we are Jakarta EE8 compliant. and compatible in MicroProfile 4 on Payara 5, and the very latest versions of these will be Jakarta EE 10 and MicroProfile 5.1, or MicroProfile 5.x, and Payara 6 Alpha is already supporting a lot of these things, and our aim is to be out there at the same time as Jakarta EE 10 is released, which is the next major version of Jakarta EE specifications, and that's due out in May timeframe, and our plan is to be there available and supporting on the day that Jakarta EE 10 is available. So we are just closely tracking the standards, as we want to be your first choice as a Jakarta EE developer or Jakarta EE organization. So WebLogic has a traditional domain model and has a traditional domain clustering model. So in Payara, we have a different model. We have something called a deployment group, and this is based on our embedded data grid, which we'll talk about briefly later. And we can do a lot more different clustering models in Payara. So we can cluster different applications across the same deployment groups. We can have multiple deployment groups within the same domain. Basically, each application targets a deployment group, and you can bring servers in and out of the group, and the application will deploy automatically to them. We also have zero configuration on the most cloud providers. So if you're in public cloud, we have capabilities whereby if you just create a deployment group within Payara and create a new instance on the cloud, then it will find and automatically cluster without any complex configuration in public cloud, which is not often the case. So the whole domain in Payara forms a single data grid, and then you then start chopping that data grid up to create deployment groups. This has the advantage in that there's much more flexibility on how you configure your data and how you store your data, and where the data sits and in which JVMs the data sits. And this gives you a lot more flexibility. So WebLogic has a lot of diagnostics in the WebLogic diagnostic framework, but Payara, we believe, goes further. And we have a vision of basically leveraging the application server runtime. I mean, the advantage of using an application server runtime over, say, a Spring Boot is that you can separate your application from the runtime, and we as a runtime can optimize your application and do a lot of diagnostics on your application. So we have a huge range of capabilities in Payara. So we have pluggable notification channels, so you can send alerts, etc., into different notifications like Microsoft Teams or SNMP or many different channels to send alerts. We also have something called Payara Insight, which can deliver detection of slow SQL queries and show you which SQL statement, is the slowest and causing problems within your server. We also have comprehensive request tracing. So what request tracing does is you basically set a threshold for how long is it acceptable for requests, say 200 milliseconds. And any request that takes longer than that, Payara Insight will flag to you and will show you what happened within that request. So when the request came in, whether you talked to any different components, whether you called any access into the database, and try and help you identify why that request took a long period of time. In addition, Payara also has health check services, which check for the standard things like WebLogic would do, like stuck threads, GC pausing, or any problems that are occurring around that within the server in a similar way to WebLogic. And then we also have Payara Micro. So this is something that isn't provided with the WebLogic platform. So Payara Micro allows you to essentially take your WAR file and then just run it from the command line using basically the hollow jar functionality of Payara Micro. So what hollow jar means essentially is that we have the Payara Micro as packaged up as a single jar file or a single executable, and we can just execute that alongside with your application. And this is especially useful when you're packaging applications into container infrastructure, because you can build a very simple container that doesn't need domains, it doesn't need managed servers. It clusters peer-to-peer on cloud. So if you run two of the Payara Micros with your application, they can auto-cluster and auto-scale without having complex administration servers. And you can package these together into a single executable in a similar sort of way as you would package a Spring Boot application if you're considering Spring Boot for microservices. Payara Micro can take your RESTful web services, package them up into a single file, package it into a container, and just run that on any container infrastructure from public cloud through Kubernetes through to just Docker. And we have that capability. Going back to our vision of how we run that application across different infrastructure, Payara Micro we target at microservices, and Payara Server at more traditional end-tier applications. Okay, so I'm passing over to my colleague. I'll stop sharing.
Just on mute currently, John. Okay, hopefully we can all hear me now and see the screen that I'm sharing there. Just before we move on, I just had a quick question for Steve that I thought might be a good one to address. Majid asks, WebLogic has best performance in pooling objects. Do you compare Payara and WebLogic in pooling?
So Payara has the same, it depends what pooling you're talking about. So Payara does have object pooling. So it has pooling for EJBs. It also has connection pools and thread pools. So I think they are comparable. It would depend on the specifics. I know that the specific tuning that you would get will be different between Payara and WebLogic. However, the specific options will be different, but the effect will be the same. You can typically cover the same level thing.
EJB specifically.
So there is EJB pooling in Payara. So you can pool EJB session beans if that's what you're talking about, and it has comparable options. I mean, they're not going to be identical, but it does have comparable pooling options.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jaden. Yeah, so my name is John Weatherill, and I work in the sales team here at Payara. So I just wanted to speak briefly about the license model for Payara Enterprise compared to WebLogic, and also just about what Payara is like to deal with as a business from a procurement perspective and from your software team's perspective as well. So there's an overview here on screen of the license model for Payara Enterprise and WebLogic. The key thing that I want you to take away here is that with Payara Enterprise, there's no separation of the actual software licenses from the support that we offer around this release. So if you're a Payara Enterprise customer and you have the licenses, then you've always got the support and the ability to raise a ticket and access to the patches and updates as well. And all of that comes at no additional cost. So it's a very straightforward and easy to understand model in this regard. It's in stark contrast to WebLogic, where often the license for this version is actually tied up with all of the other software licenses that you can that your company has with Oracle. Can make it rather sticky, we would say, and actually difficult to get out of that sort of arrangement. But it will be worth moving from WebLogic over to Payara and going through that process. Procurement people absolutely love to deal with us because our model is very straightforward to understand, and it's just one rolling annual subscription, more similar to some of the other open source software that you may be using already. There are also no additional add-ons or extras that are charged separately in Payara compared to WebLogic. So the example that's given in the PowerPoint here is that we don't charge extra for data grid. That's built into both Payara Community and Payara Enterprise as standard. So no hidden costs during the purchase process. We won't suddenly come to you and tell you that something additional that you're asking for is going to cost more money. It's a very upfront and open model that we operate on. For this reason, it's proving very successful and popular with our customers. One thing that I also want to touch upon is that often people, when they're looking to move away from WebLogic, they're also looking to update their Java version. So as Steve mentioned earlier, Payara is more compatible with up-to-date versions of Java compared to WebLogic, which is actually lagging behind by several years in some cases. So we actually offer a supported version of OpenJDK from our partners at Azul. So if you're considering moving off Oracle Java over to a build of OpenJDK, we'd recommend talking to us and investigating this version. We offer the Azul JDK as part of the standard enterprise agreement, and you can actually access support for the JDK and raise tickets via Payara's own support channel as well. It's a way of combining two elements, two costs in your application stack into one subscription, which is easier to manage, and it also helps to ensure that the number of support channels that you've actually got open is reduced as well, because you can just come straight to us to raise a ticket for either Payara or JDK. So what is Payara like to deal with as a company, and what does our reach look like? Well, as you can see from this slide, we are a truly global organization. In fact, we've now got users of the enterprise platform on every single continent. We don't really favor or specialize in any particular industry. So whether you're public or private sector, and no matter what industry you're in, we'll really approach that with the same level of expertise, and our knowledge of the types of different industries that we deal with is broad. You'll find that our approach is really quite holistic and often sympathetic to your project aims and needs, and we can generally offer much greater flexibility. I'll use that word again because I think that's key here. We offer greater flexibility from a commercial perspective as well as from a software perspective. So worth bearing in mind when you're coming to speak to us about possibly migrating from WebLogic onto Payara. Tell us in detail about your project, and we'll help to put together a tailored package based on your exact needs. And Payara is growing as well at a very consistent and sustainable rate. So the community platform, which is what the majority of our users use, especially if they're not running critical applications on Payara, this has seen very consistent uptake in the few years since it launched, and the number of subscribers to the enterprise platform has really mirrored that as well. So there are certainly companies who approach us who really need to be on the enterprise version, whether that's for reasons around compliance or security, or they simply want that helping hand of support and access to our expert advice to help them along with their project. We're 100% funded by people who subscribed to the enterprise version. So we're not funded by any external sources. This means that the more people who actually subscribe to the enterprise version, the more a resource we can put into Payara platform as a whole, and we can improve the platform for our community users as well as our customers who use the enterprise level subscription. And finally, besides the support that we offer for Payara Enterprise, that's available on 24/7 or 10x5 SLAs, We also have the option of Payara Accelerator, which essentially is a consultancy option that we can offer to help you with the migration. That might be basically keeping a pool of hours to one side that you can access on an ad hoc basis when you have specific questions or queries. Perhaps you want to implement the monitoring aspect of Payara or get help with specific projects like clustering. We can cater for that, not just through the support portal, but also by getting a Payara engineer hands-on with your team and actually working through specific aspects of the project. It can also be used to troubleshoot specific issues. So in most cases, migration from WebLogic to Payara Enterprise is quite straightforward, especially if your applications are built to the Jakarta EE specifications. But you may occasionally need a little bit of additional support and some consultancy provided on working through a specific blocker or issue that you might have. So you're certainly not on your own when you're migrating from WebLogic to Payara. We offer a full holistic support service, plus this additional layer of consulting help that can be used in a targeted way to actually help you to move the project forwards. If the webinar today has sparked your interest and you'd like to learn more about the technical aspect of migrating from WebLogic to Payara Enterprise and what that might look like for your specific project, your application, then the best place to start would be to take a look on our website, where you'll find migration guides from the current versions of WebLogic and also some of the older versions as well. These guides will give you a good general overview of what it would take to migrate from WebLogic to Payara. But obviously these will only get you so far. So if you have specific questions relating to your project, come and talk to us. We're always happy to converse via email or set up a fact-find call for your application and help you to understand what it would take to work through a project like that. And we can also use that as an opportunity to help you to understand the commercial model in more detail and how it would apply to your business. That's it for me, so I'll hand over back to Jaden now.
Brill, thank you very much. We just had another question. This one is for Steve. And this would be if Payara has any vision on the question how to replace Oracle OSB when migrating from Oracle middleware.
Oh, tricky question. Oracle OSB. So I take it we're talking about Oracle OSB, it's Oracle Service Bus. So Oracle Service Bus is a big and complex product. I used to do consultancy on Oracle Service Bus many years ago. We don't have a specific product that does what Oracle Service Bus does. However, we do have support for the underlying technologies that Oracle Service Bus uses. For example, web services, RESTful services. So typically people would re-architect that sort of application now into a microservices architecture. There's no direct migration path from OSB to anything that I'm aware of.
Okay, another question. This one's from Keenan. I'm actually interested in integration point/module development for Payara. I picked up some older Glassfish examples, but can't build either of Glassfish or Payara Server master builds right now. Would appreciate some guidance, honestly.
So I don't know why you wouldn't be able to build Payara Server's master build because on community, if we're talking about there from a source code perspective, that should build just straight out the box. Glassfish, I can't really speak of. Glassfish at the moment, in too much detail, is basically focused on Jakarta EE10. So it will be using all the new namespaces and new name specifications in its current master. But our Payara 5 master should be still Jakarta EE8, and therefore it should just build with Maven clean install. If it doesn't, I would raise an issue on the forum because that's a bug if it doesn't just build straight out of the box.
Yes, I think he says Payara Server community latest have some unit test errors. I can't pass Maven install.
Okay, that I would raise that on the forum because that should work.
I'll put the forum link as in
Yeah.
the chat. It's a good point to put. If you guys do have any sort of questions, there is a Payara community where people will try and help you with any issues. For bugs, though, it's always best to go to GitHub to raise any bugs there. If you do need things solved or support, then Payara Enterprise is always going to be the best place to go to get immediate engineer questions asked. Okay. If there's any other questions, please feel free to put them now. Otherwise, you can always message us through our socials on LinkedIn or Twitter, or if you head to the forum or the website, we can also address them there. Here we go. Payara use InfiniSpan or other cache?
Payara embeds neither though. Well, Payara doesn't embed InfiniSpan. Payara embeds Hazelcast as its data grid technology.
Okay, fantastic. Hopefully that helps, Majid. What we'll do as well, guys, is we'll, for anyone that came in a bit later, this is a recorded session, so we will send this out for everyone to watch later and host on YouTube as well. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.